In Laboratory Reddit, today's story is...
I went to the airport to say goodbye to my sister and her husband on their luxury honeymoon when I noticed something strange about their designer luggage. Hours later, she called me crying because the police removed them from the plane. What she didn't know is that I had already seen the charges on my credit card. I still can't believe what happened. I'm 27 years old. I've always been responsible with my life and finances. My parents, Edward and Dina, both 52, raised me to be independent and to take care of my money. I work hard, save, and try not to get into unnecessary debt. That's why this whole situation with my sister Bonnie, 21, and her husband Daryl, also 21, seems so unbelievable to me. Bonnie and I always received the same treatment from our parents. We never competed like other siblings often do, and there was no favorite daughter in our family. However, we were very different. She was fun, the life of the party, outgoing and charming. Everyone enjoyed her company. She knew exactly what to say to come out on top in any situation and get what she wanted, and it always worked for her. But that charm that made her so popular had its dark side. Bonnie never took responsibility for her actions. She quickly blamed others when things went wrong and had a habit of lying to avoid problems. Over the years, I've seen her use her charisma to get away with improper things. Not only did she avoid responsibilities and lie, but she manipulated others to do things for her, always expecting someone to fix her mistakes. Despite everything, I always tried to support her. As the older sister, I took on the role of the responsible one. I tried to guide her when she needed it, perhaps being the only one who saw beyond her facade. I never turned my back on her, and when she disappointed me or made decisions I disagreed with, I tried to be there for her, offering advice and support. Things started to change when she met Daryl. I had nothing personal against him, but Bonnie was rushing everything, and I couldn't help feeling uneasy about their relationship. Daryl was a nice guy, but he didn't have much to offer. Unemployed, he had dropped out of school and seemed to lack motivation. Bonnie didn't care. The only relevant thing for her was that he made her feel good about herself. They lived in a perfect fantasy bubble. When Bonnie announced at the beginning of the year that she was pregnant, my parents were shocked. Although they loved Bonnie, they didn't understand how she and Daryl were going to support themselves, much less a baby. They made it clear that they weren't going to cover all the expenses. They told the couple it was time to grow up and sort things out on their own. Bonnie wasn't happy, but she had no alternative. Shortly after, they decided to get married. My parents were skeptical about the wedding. They thought they were too young, but with the baby on the way, they supported the decision, hoping it would motivate them to take life more seriously. I didn't have much hope. Daryl always seemed to me like someone who runs from responsibility. He's the type who blames everyone else for his problems instead of doing something to solve them. After the wedding, Bonnie started talking about her dream honeymoon. She told us they wanted to travel around Europe visiting all the major cities. It sounded like pure fantasy, and I didn't take it seriously. Neither she nor Daryl had money, so I assumed they were just words. At most, I imagined they would do something cheap and close by, like a weekend camping. Then, a few days ago, I received an email from my credit card company alerting me to suspicious activity on my account. At first, I thought it might be a fraudulent email, but I decided to log in to make sure everything was in order. What I saw left me breathless. Thousands of euros in incomprehensible charges. Plane tickets, hotel reservations, payments to travel agencies, all first class, luxury hotels, and exclusive tours. I quickly put two and two together. Bonnie and Daryl had somehow gotten my card details and used them to finance their European honeymoon. I didn't understand how they had obtained my information until I remembered that a couple of months ago, Bonnie asked to borrow my purse to buy something at a store. I didn't think much of it then, but now it's obvious that she must have photographed my card or written down the details. I felt stupid for not anticipating it. The audacity of it all left me speechless. These weren't small charges for basic necessities. They were giving themselves the grand luxury. First-class flights, expensive hotels, multiple countries. It wasn't a matter of survival, but of living it up with my money. I immediately called the card company to report the fraud. They were very attentive and told me they would initiate an investigation, although they warned me it could take weeks to resolve the issue. Meanwhile, my card was blocked. Seeing thousands of euros disappear was devastating after so much effort to keep my finances in order. Then came the day of their departure. Bonnie asked me to go to the airport to see them off. I found it strange since I had seen them the day before at the wedding, but I agreed. I didn't know why she wanted me there, but I thought it would be a nice gesture of support. When I arrived at the airport, everything seemed idyllic. My sister and Darrell were overflowing with happiness with matching luggage. They looked like they came straight out of a luxury travel ad. Too organized, especially considering their financial situation. Designer suitcases, elegant clothes, everything screamed luxury vacation. I didn't say anything to not ruin the moment. I just played along and took some pictures in front of the boarding gate as if it were the happiest day of their lives. It was then they mentioned their honeymoon around Europe, visiting multiple countries. I don't know if it was because of the ostentation of the whole scene or because days before they were complaining about not having money even for the basics, but at that moment everything fell into place. It was them. I still wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt, but it was evident they had stolen from me. Even so, I said goodbye normally, wished them to have fun, and left. It seemed like a routine farewell, but less than an hour later my phone rang. It was Bonnie, crying inconsolably. At first, I didn't understand anything through her sobs. What I managed to understand is that she had been taken off the plane, escorted by the police. I was in shock. According to her explanation, her flight had been delayed, and just when it was about to take off, the police appeared and told her and Darrell they couldn't fly. They were forced to leave the plane and the airport. From what I understood, there was some problem with the tickets, though I didn't know if they were fake or if something shady had happened with the purchase. But this is what really happened. They were removed because I had blocked my card after reporting the fraud and the tickets they bought through the agency. The payment was never completed. The agent had been calling them for days, and they had been ignoring the calls. Finally, the agent contacted the police. Bonnie begged me for help, asked me to go to the airport to pick them up. She was hysterical, repeating how unfair it all was and that she didn't know what was going to happen now. But as she pleaded with me, I felt that she had simply gotten herself into trouble and now expected me to fix it. Honestly, I didn't feel responsible. Whatever had happened, it was her fault. She had to face the consequences. I told Bonnie I couldn't help her. I calmly explained that I wasn't involved in this and it wasn't my problem to solve it. I didn't want to get trapped in her mess. The call ended with her still crying, but I stood firm. Since then, Bonnie has bombarded me with messages and calls, blaming me for not helping her. She's furious because I didn't intervene and try to fix things. I can tell she's trying to make me feel guilty, so I'll do something now. But I really don't think I did anything wrong. I didn't participate in their decisions, and I'm not going to get them out of the problem they created themselves. Now I wonder if I acted correctly. Bonnie insists that, as her sister, I should have helped her in a difficult time, but I don't think it's my responsibility to fix everything for her. She and Darrell made their choices and must face the consequences. Am I being too harsh by not helping my sister when she was escorted off her honeymoon flight? Update 1. Hello again. I wanted to share how the situation has evolved. As I mentioned before, I contacted my card company and reported the fraud, initiating an investigation. Then, Bonnie and Darrell were kicked off their flight due to payment issues. I was sure they were responsible, so I informed the company, which investigated and confirmed my suspicions. They told me they had reported them and they would be taken to court. For some reason, I asked them to wait a few days. Before making any decision, I spoke with my parents. They were really disappointed with Bonnie and Darrell, but they understood why I had to act. It wasn't easy for me, but I knew it was the right thing to do. They had stolen from me, and I couldn't let it go unpunished. Even Darrell's parents were on my side and didn't defend what their son had done. The whole family was upset, but understood that the situation couldn't be ignored. Finally, I told the company to proceed as they saw fit. When Bonnie and Darrell returned home after the honeymoon fiasco, instead of enjoying Europe, they spent most of their time in court. I think even then they didn't understand the gravity of what they had done. They had used my card without permission, and after all the problems caused, I couldn't just let it slide. The judicial process was relatively quick. The judge ruled they wouldn't go to prison, which surprised me a bit, although I guess it's common in these cases. However, they were fined €25,000. They had to pay this amount for their crime, but the problem was that neither had such a sum. It was clear they couldn't afford it. Both had dropped out of college, and without education or stable jobs, it was impossible for them to gather the money. I think what made everything worse was that their respective parents refused to help them. They left them to face the consequences alone. Bonnie and Daryl ended up working 3 jobs each, just to survive and try to pay the fine. They couldn't afford rent, so they ended up living in my parents' basement. It wasn't ideal, but at least they had a roof over their heads. Bonnie continued to call me, trying to convince me to forgive her and forget everything. She insisted that I should do it because we were family, and family always sticks together. She constantly called me, asking for help, begging me to forget about the theft and the card, and just move on. She wanted me to be there for her as if nothing had happened, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't pretend that nothing had happened. If Bonnie had asked me for help before, I would have been there for her. I always was, but stealing from me, that was something I couldn't overlook. She made a decision, and now she had to face the consequences. I told her I couldn't help her anymore. I wasn't going to let her make me feel guilty for not forgiving her just because we were sisters. Bonnie probably expected me to give in. She continued sending messages and calling, explaining how much she was suffering and how difficult everything was for them. She even promised to do whatever necessary to pay me back if I gave them a chance. But I had no intention of giving in. It wasn't about the money, but about trust. She had betrayed my trust, and I couldn't just forget it. I needed to make sure she understood that her actions had consequences. For a while, I kept my distance. I didn't answer her calls or respond to her messages. I know that must have hurt her, but it was important to remain firm in my decision. Bonnie and Daryl had to learn their lesson and figure out how to solve their problems on their own. Things weren't easy for them. I could see it. I observed how hard they worked trying to pay the fine. They were doing everything possible, but I knew it wasn't enough. They seemed trapped in this situation for the long term, and I wasn't sure if they would ever get out of it. But it wasn't my responsibility to fix it. I had to make sure they understood that stealing from me wasn't something I could ignore. I know some would say I should have forgiven her, that I should have let it go, but for me it wasn't that simple. I didn't want to turn my back on my sister, but I also couldn't act as if everything was okay when she had done something so serious. At this point, I'm not sure if Bonnie and I will ever have the same relationship. Maybe she expected me to change my mind and forgive her, but I don't think that's going to happen. I don't know what the future holds for us, but for now I maintain my position. Update 2. Bonnie gave birth a few months ago to a girl we call Minnie. I can't help but feel compassion for her because she is completely innocent in all this mess. While my parents and I try to provide her with a stable and loving environment, Bonnie, her mother, seems more focused on herself than on caring for her own daughter. Bonnie hasn't worked since giving birth, and I've noticed she's not as attentive to Minnie as one would expect. At first, I thought it might be postpartum depression, but that doesn't seem to be the case. She's not sad or having a hard time. She has simply continued with her life as if the baby hadn't changed anything. Her friends are constantly at the house, spending hours gossiping and chatting about any topic, except what's truly important. While they have fun, Minnie spends most of her time with my parents, who have really stepped up to help. I understand that Bonnie is only 21 years old. At that age, you want to have fun, go out with friends, and enjoy life. But now she also has a daughter, and that means her life no longer revolves only around her. It's also about Minnie. But Bonnie doesn't seem to understand this. She spends time at home with her friends, and although I'm glad she has support, she seems more concerned about her image than about being the mother Minnie needs. She's constantly mindful of her appearance, how she's perceived, and how much fun she's having. I can't help but think she treats motherhood as something secondary. Bonnie has barely paid attention to her marriage either. Her husband has been absent since the baby was born. In fact, he wasn't even present during much of the pregnancy. I thought that once the baby was born, he would take responsibility, but I was wrong. He blames everything on Minnie, saying that having a daughter ruined his life. The way he talks about her disgusts me. He lives elsewhere, and nobody knows exactly where. He doesn't even answer Bonnie's calls or those from his own parents. He simply disappeared from their lives. He has only visited Bonnie a handful of times since the birth, and each time he came, he seemed completely disinterested. It's as if his own daughter didn't matter to him at all. It's frustrating because, as much as I want to help, I don't think Bonnie realizes she needs to take responsibility for her actions. Minnie is her daughter, and she should be present. It's hard to see how Bonnie evades her obligations, while our parents are the ones who are really raising her daughter. At first, I thought maybe Bonnie was going through a difficult time, and I tried to be understanding, but after months of observing her behavior, I've come to the conclusion that she simply doesn't care as much as she should. She continues living as if everything will resolve itself, but the truth is that Minnie deserves much more. The saddest thing is that both Bonnie and Darrell seem to have abandoned their daughter. My parents are the ones who mainly take care of her. They help with feeding, diapers, games, and everything involved in raising a baby. And while I'm glad they do so much for Minnie, they shouldn't be the ones raising her. It should be Bonnie and Darrell, but neither seems interested in being real parents. Bonnie made an effort at the beginning, but as soon as she started receiving attention from her friends and focusing on herself again, she forgot Minnie's needs. I'm not saying she doesn't love her daughter, I'm sure she does, but love isn't enough when you're a parent. Being a parent means putting your child's needs before your own, and Bonnie isn't doing that. I've tried talking to her to make her see what's happening. I've told her that being a mother means taking responsibility for Minnie. She can't just live as if nothing had changed, but she doesn't seem to care. She ignores it and goes about her business. Every time I try to talk to her, I feel like I'm the one being too harsh. She tells me she'll figure it out, but that's not enough. I can't stand by watching her neglect her daughter. At this point, I've decided I need to intervene, whether Bonnie wants it or not. I can't keep watching her make excuses while Minnie suffers the consequences. It's hard to admit that Bonnie is failing as a mother, but the truth is right in front of me. My parents are doing a lot for Minnie, and I'm helping too. But there's a limit to what we can do if Bonnie doesn't step up and really take responsibility as a mother. I don't want to hate Bonnie or say she's a bad person, but her behavior makes it impossible to deny that she's not being the mother Minnie needs right now. She may be young, but that doesn't mean she can ignore the responsibilities that come with raising a child. Minnie deserves a stable and loving environment, something she currently doesn't receive from her parents. Meanwhile, Darrell remains missing. He's been absent for months, and I don't see signs that he's coming back. It's as if he abandoned both Bonnie and Minnie, and I don't understand how he can live with himself. I didn't expect him to be perfect, but I didn't expect him to be so absent either. At this point, he seems to have decided to ignore his daughter, and it's heartbreaking. That's where we are now. My parents are assuming the raising of Minnie, but they shouldn't have to do it. That's Bonnie's responsibility. She should be there for her daughter, not focusing solely on herself. I've been doing what I can, but I can't keep carrying this weight for her. She needs to realize it's time to grow up and be the mother Minnie deserves. Update 3. Bonnie went back to work earlier than expected, and honestly, it left me stunned. She said she was bored and had nothing to do. She has a newborn, but she was so absorbed in her own life that she didn't see the responsibility she had at home. It's not that she couldn't take care of Minnie. Our parents had taken on that role, so I guess Bonnie felt she could return to her old routine. She doesn't understand that she's now a mother, and that comes with responsibilities. It deeply bothers me to see her so disinterested in her maternal role. I understand she's young and probably didn't expect her life to change so drastically, but still, the way she handles the situation seems unacceptable to me. She should focus on Minnie, not on escaping the reality of being a mother. By the way, Darrell reappeared. When I thought he had come back for Minnie, something happened that left me even more perplexed. Despite the huge debt of 25,000 euros pending after the trial for fraud with my card, Bonnie and Darrell went on vacation. They took the money Darrell had saved and left. They didn't care about the court order or the 1-year deadline to pay the fine or face jail. They simply spent their money on a trip, acting as if everything was perfect. No consideration for the consequences, living in a bubble and pretending their problems didn't exist. Selfish and irresponsible behavior. Upon returning, the situation worsened. Bonnie and Darrell began to act as if they really cared about Minnie. Bonnie constantly repeated how much she missed her dear daughter. It sounded so fake. It was evident she was just trying to look good in front of our parents. Until then, they had avoided any real responsibility with Minnie, acting as if their lives hadn't become complicated, as if they were still the same carefree couple as always. My mother, who had been doing so much for Minnie, reached her limit. She clearly told Bonnie that if she wasn't interested in being a mother, perhaps she and Daryl should cede full custody to my parents. I didn't expect them to accept, but to my surprise, they did. They seemed relieved to get rid of that responsibility. They didn't want to continue caring for Minnie, and giving up custody seemed like the easiest way out. They accepted without hardly hesitating, and everything happened very quickly. The legal process was completed in record time. At one moment, Minnie was legally Bonnie and Darrell's daughter, and the next, she was officially my parents' daughter. They had obtained full custody, and it was official. I didn't expect everything to happen so quickly, and honestly, I was stunned. I felt like everything was happening precipitously, without anyone stopping to consider the long-term consequences. It was confusing and disappointing to see how quickly Bonnie and Darrell had given up on their daughter. I spoke with my mother after the custody change to understand why they made this decision so quickly. She explained that it wasn't about punishing Bonnie and Darrell, but about Minnie's welfare. She said the little girl deserved a stable and loving home that Bonnie wasn't providing. Since she and my father had always taken care of Minnie, it made sense for them to legally take on that responsibility. I understood their reasoning, but it still seemed rushed to me. It was difficult to witness how everything unfolded. I thought that maybe Bonnie would finally react after everything that had happened. I believed she would realize how much she had to lose and would put her life in order for Minnie, but that wasn't the case. She and Darrell remained focused on themselves, not on their daughter. After giving up custody, Bonnie didn't even seem affected. She was more interested in having fun. She went back to work, went out with friends, and did things only for herself, as if Minnie were an afterthought. Now Minnie is with my parents, while Bonnie and Darrell live their lives without worrying too much about their daughter. I know they made their decision and didn't want the responsibility of being parents. I understand that Minnie is better off with my parents, but the whole situation still seems wrong to me. I can't help wondering if I could have done more or if I was too harsh in how I handled all of this.